Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl, and this is going to be episode 120 of my poker vlog. For this one, I play a 2-5 session at Orange City Racing and Card Club. Before I get in the hands, I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Hope you all got exactly what you wanted this year. For me, my wife definitely won the battle this time, getting me this amazing light-up sign of the logo. Definitely was not expecting that. Additionally, if you're not in the Florida area and would like to play with me online, I am constantly playing on ClubGG and even streaming some of my sessions. So if you ever catch one of those live, feel free to jump in the comments, ask me some questions. I'm very open and talkative with the audience, so definitely check that out if you are able to. And now, let's roll the tape. All right, first hand of note. With two limps, a middle position player raised to $15. I'm on the button with ace-10 offsuit. Against a short stack and someone who's been very loose and really willing to throw the money around, I think this is a pretty easy 3-bet, so I raised to $50. The initial raiser is the only caller, so we're heads up to a flop of ace-8 deuce, 2 clubs. Overall, I'd say a very good board for me. Top pair, decent kicker. I can get value from a flush draw, and maybe a few middling pocket pairs will pay off a flop bet if they're disbelieving. So I see bet for $55, a little over half pot, and my opponent snap jams for about 200. Well, I'm never really folding. I hope you're on a flush draw because I'm doing pretty good against that. So I make the call, and we're off to a run out. Jack of diamonds, relatively safe. 9 of clubs, not what I'm looking for. Put my opponent on club draw, pretty disappointed to see that. But he shows ace-4. So my 10 will definitely play, and we start this session by stacking a short stack. Next, interesting hand. An early position player raises to $20. I'm in the big blind with king-queen offsuit. Definitely going to defend this one. Could 3-bet. Against an early position player, we're going to give him a little bit of credit and just call this one. Heads up to a flop out of position of ace-jack-deuce, rainbow. When I check it to my opponent continues for $20. He had been c-betting at very high frequencies, so he doesn't even have to have anything right now. Plus, I have a gut shot. Out of position, not the best scenario, but I do think it's highly likely that both my pairs are live, so I make the call. When the river's the 5 of spades, not quite what I'm looking for. I think that I have to just give up here against continued aggression, but luckily for me, when I check, my opponent checks it back. River is the jack of hearts. Now I think this is the perfect spot for a bluff attempt. Although I have one of the hands I'm hoping my opponent can have, like king-queen, queen-10, just a bunch of missed Broadway cards. Blocking that's not the greatest, but I do think I could easily have an ace or a jack and play the exact same way, given our positions in this hand. If I had an ace or a jack, I would check it to my opponent, do the c-bet, he keeps the betting lead, turn, he has the betting lead, so I check to him, and now go for some value when I have a decent hand. So a bluff will be no different. I bet $60. Don't really want to have to show the table that I am bluffing some of the time. And luckily for me, this time my opponent does fold. So we get a nice little bluff through. Definitely adds to the confidence going forward. The next hand of note, I'm in early position. I have pocket jacks. I raise to $15, pretty much my standard opening size. 3 different opponents call, so we're going to go 4 ways to a flop of 9-3 deuce rainbow. Pretty good to keep an overpair with jacks. Not too often that happens. So when it does, I'm going to continue. I bet $30. Really shouldn't go too big with this one. Although we have an overpair, our opponents have a clear nut advantage. They have all the sets in range. I don't have too many of them. And I pretty much never have 4-3. So I think half pot's a pretty good size. The big blind is the only caller. So we're going heads up to a turn card, which is the 5 of diamonds. That's neutral, I guess. Suppose you could happily mix between betting or checking. However, I don't get that decision because my opponent leads for 50. Not quite sure what to make of this. I feel like 9-8, 9-10 might play this way. Want to value/protect their hand when they perceive that I could easily be just c-betting with random overcards. So thinking my opponent's pretty much relegated to just a 9 here, and maybe some pair plus straight draws 5-6, maybe ace-5 at some frequency. I'm going to just call this one and reevaluate river. River's a board pairing 9. When my opponent checks to me, I'd say it's kind of a tricky spot. I think it's pretty unlikely he would check with trip 9s or a full house, as there's very little likelihood that I would take the betting lead and my opponent would get the check raise he'd be looking for. Similarly, I think that 6-7 and ace deuce are just too strong to not go for some value on this river. I think you just have to bet with your straight. So I'm pretty confident I have the best hand, but I'm not really sure what I can get value from. If my opponent had like 4-5, I expect he would just fold as he's now counterfeit. So not exactly sure what I can get value from. I decided to just take a very passive and nitty line and just check it back. My opponent announces 2-pair, and I just show mine are almost certainly a better 2-pair. Following that, I button straddle. With 2 limps, I raise to $35. With ace-jack of clubs, definitely a premium. No one really ever expects you to actually have a hand when you button straddle, so it's nice when you do. Both of the blinds are the limpers, and they are the only players to call. So we're going 3 ways to a flop of ace-queen-deuce, 2 spades. When both my opponents check to me, I think I pretty much have this board locked up. Sure, there's a flush draw to try to protect your pair of aces against. However, there are plenty of times where I'll keep a top pair in my checking range. I have the position for the rest of the hand and can get value on later streets given some safer runouts. So I'm going to pot control a little bit and just check this one back. When the turn is the 9 of diamonds, pretty good card all things considered. If my opponent had like Jack 10, they may call a bet this time, drawing pretty thin. So when both my opponents check to me, I bet $55. The big blind is the only caller. He's pretty much the tightest player at the table. Doesn't really relinquish chips too often without actually having a good hand. So not feeling super confident that I have the best hand. But either way, we are heads up to a river card of the King of Clubs. Not the greatest card, as the Jack 10 does get there, as well as some King Queens, maybe King 9 at some frequency. And theoretically, I guess my opponent could have Ace King too. Like, he is that tight, he would limp call Ace King. When my opponent checks to me, I really don't think I can get paid by worse from this particular player. So I check it back. And indeed, my opponent had a set of queens.
Ho, ho, ho.
So yeah, when your opponents are limp calling pocket queens, definitely tough opponents to go for thin value against. Just keep a note of that for the future. Next hand of note. I'm in early position with pocket sevens, definitely going to open this one up. I make it $15. 3 later position players decide to call, so we're going 4 ways to a flop of queen 4, 3, 2 diamonds. Only a single overcard is not enough for me not to go for some value. I can get paid by some flush draws. If a 5-6 or diamond peel on the turn, I pick up a lot of backdoor draws. So this is going to be one of the times where I bet, hopefully thin the field, maybe even take it down right now. I bet $30. Only 1 later position player decides to call. Fine with that. Let's see a turn card. 8 of diamonds. Not super happy that it's an over to the 7s, but it does give me backdoor diamonds. Thinking I picked up a decent amount of equity the times I'm behind, I check it to my opponent, and my opponent bets $50. Here's where things get a little interesting. This opponent had bet when checked to in position probably 90 to 100% of the time. There are very few times I saw this opponent check back when he was last to act at all in this session. Thinking he's just betting with position and doesn't even need to have a hand at all, let alone a pair of queens, I'm definitely going to go for a raise here. If I had a hand like ace-jack, ace-5 of diamonds, I would c-bet the flop small and then probably check the turn, hoping to induce / go for value on river. But when my opponent bets, I would raise those hands. So thinking I could actually rep a lot of made flushes and possibly get my opponent off queen no diamond or just fold his air that he would bluff with, I'm going to go for a raise here. I make it $160, and my opponent thinks for about 30 seconds before finally relinquishing his hand. So, happy to go for, I guess, a check raise semi-bluff. It's nice when creative moves like this work out. I was at a must-move table, so now I'm in the main game. That's why the angle's different. Newly sitted down, an early position player raised to $15. I'm in the hijack with king 8 of diamonds. I'm going to make the call. Position, suited king, probably not great, but folding is boring. The blinds call, so we're 4 ways to a flop of king 3 deuce. 1 diamond. The blinds check and the pre-flop aggressor checks. Now it's on me. Again, there are certain times where I'll have top pair. This time not a great kicker, where I can check it back, go for some pot control, some deception, protect my checking range, as I don't really want to just only bet when I have good hands and only check when I have bad hands. You want to be a little bit harder to predict. So this is going to be one of the times, especially with a backdoor diamond draw, where I check it back. Turn is the 10 of spades, so we do not get that diamond draw we were hoping for. When all the players check to me a second time, if there was ever worry of my king not being good on the flop, it is gone now. I can go for some pure value. Hopefully a 10 will call, as they will disbelieve that I would check back a king last to act. I bet $35. Only the initial pre-flop aggressor decides to call, so we're heads up to a river card, which is the 6 of diamonds. When he checks to me a third time, I'm going to go for some relatively thin value. Top pair, no kicker. Since we're just targeting basically a 10 and maybe like pocket 8s, pocket 7s, things such as that, I'm going to bet very small. $50 is the wager. My opponent snap calls. I just announce king and show it, and he taps the table and finally pays off the bet and eventually mucks. So I would say definitely got a decent amount of value with just top pair, no kicker. Next hand of note, and this is definitely the hand of the night. It folds all the way to me on the button. I did not straddle this time, but I am going to open ace queen offsuit to $15. Both of the blinds decide to call, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of ace queen 6, 2 hearts.
Oh my God!
When both opponents check to me, yes, sometimes I check top pairs. This time is not going to be one of them. My opponents could easily perceive that I'm just c-betting from the button after an open, which I would do a lot of the time. Heart draws to get value from, straight draws to get value from. This time we bet $25. When both opponents decide to call, definitely thinking at least one of them has to be on hearts. With so much of the board locked up, it's hard for there to be too much else out there. When the turn is the jack of clubs, I actually think this is a really good card for me. I could super cooler ace jack, queen jack, and if my opponent had queen 10, jack 10, king queen, king jack, things such as that, picking up a gut shot along with a pair seems like they'd be unwilling to fold. Additionally, jack X of hearts is feeling pretty comfortable right now. When it checks to me, I'm going to size up a little bit, go for 2/3. I bet $80. To this bet, only the small blind decides to call. So really hoping for a clean river on this one. 6 of clubs, I would say, is relatively clean. Unfortunately, if my opponent specifically had queen jack, I'm probably not getting paid anymore. But at least the hearts missed and all the straight draws missed, so feeling pretty good about the strength of my hand. Probably going to bet about $100 or so. Kind of small, not much I think I get paid on the 3rd street. But the small blind goes into the tank. He's really thinking. He's counting out his stack. Starts with 50, makes it 100, adds a 25 on top, takes the 25 off. As he's doing this, you know, I just think he either has missed hearts or a 6. And if my opponent called the turn with just a 6, I'd say that's pretty unlikely for most players. Additionally, with the backdoor clubs, for him to have that, he has to have called the flop. I don't even know. I guess king 10 of clubs, maybe ace X of clubs, and that's pretty much it. If he has that, you know, good for him. My opponent eventually announces,
150.
I just snap call. I'm not folding top 2 pair. It's too strong. If my opponent had missed hearts, I expect him to lead. And that is exactly what he had on this particular hand.
I had a heart draw too, but I figured that's what you had, so not too many hearts left.
So the stack's definitely looking pretty good now. We're only into the game for $700, so feel pretty good about this profit. Before the next interesting hand. With one limp, the hijack raised to $15. I 3-bet to $50 with ace-king offsuit. The button is the only caller. The initial raiser decides to let it go. So we're heads up to a flop of 10-4-5. As a board this dry, I would down bet most of my overpairs, similar to the jack's hand. Definitely going to go for a bet here. Plenty of backdoor straight potential, as well as the fact that my opponent likely missed this board a high percentage of the time. So I'm just going to down bet $35. This time it works out. My opponent folds pretty quickly. Nice little pot there. Which brings us to the final hand of note. I'm under the gun. I raised to $20 with pocket queens. Definitely going to size up a little bit. Don't want too many bad hands to be able to see the flop for a good price. Well, one later position player and the button decide to call. So we're 3 ways to a flop of ace king 8. Not the board that I'm looking for. As I'm first to act, I'm honestly hoping that all my history of checking back some top pairs will let me check this one down, get to showdown, and just win a lot of the time, and no one will think that they can bluff me, as I'll have just top pairs and check calls sometimes. So I check the flop. If it's checked through, I'll definitely bet the turn, hopefully get a king to fold, as I could easily just have an ace here. Luckily for me, it checks through, and even better when the turn is the queen of clubs. What an insane turn card. Well, now thinking that no one really has much, gonna bet very small. Maybe someone will pay off a $30 bet with a king or a club draw. Later position player calls, button folds, so we're heads up to a river, which is a complete brick, doesn't change anything with a 5 of hearts. Maybe a king or an ace will pay off an $80 bet, but my opponent snap folds. Always fun to turn a set. And with that, we are into the game for $700, out of the game for $1,532. That is a profit of $832 across 6 hours, equates to $138 an hour, or 27 big blinds an hour. Yeah, this session I definitely got some more bluffs in than usual. A check raise bluff, I'd say, is definitely a deviation from the norm, but really, it's just when you're exploiting players. If they're just betting too often or too aggressive, you have to definitely figure out some maneuvers to get some counterplay in. But either way, thank you for watching if you made it to this part, and I will see you all in the new year.